The Eternal Way, a deep exploration of Lao Tzu's timeless wisdom. Section 1. Introduction. The mysterious sage and eternal way. In the midst of ancient China, sometime during the 6th century BCE, there lived a man whose very existence remained shrouded in mystery. His name was Lao Tzu, which translates simply as old master or old child, and the legends surrounding him are as paradoxical as the teachings he left behind. According to tradition, Lao Tzu served as a keeper of archives in the royal court of Zhou, a position that granted him access to the accumulated wisdom of generations. Yet despite his prestigious role, he grew disillusioned with the corruption and artificiality of civilized society, and one day decided to leave it all behind. The most famous legend tells us that as Lao Tzu rode westward on a water buffalo, heading toward the mountain passes to live out his days in solitude, he was stopped by a border guard named Yin Shi. This gatekeeper, recognizing the sage's wisdom, pleaded with him not to leave without first recording his insights for posterity. Lao Tzu agreed, and in 3 days produced the Tao Te Ching, a slim volume of approximately 5,000 Chinese characters that would become one of the most translated and influential texts in human history. After completing this work, the old master supposedly continued his journey into the western wilderness, never to be seen again. Whether this story is historical fact or beautiful mythology matters little, for the teachings themselves possess a timeless quality that transcends their origin. The Tao Te Ching, whose title is variously translated as the Classic of the Way and its Power, the Book of the Way and Virtue, or the Canon of Reason and Virtue, consists of 81 short chapters written in cryptic, poetic verse. These passages read less like a systematic philosophy and more like whispered secrets from a consciousness that has touched something fundamental about existence itself. What makes Lao Tzu's wisdom particularly relevant today is its radical departure from the conventional ways humans typically approach life's challenges. In an age of relentless striving, constant connectivity, and desperate grasping for control, the Tao Te Ching offers a profoundly different path. It speaks of yielding rather than forcing, of emptiness rather than accumulation, of stillness rather than frenetic activity, of letting go rather than holding tight. These teachings are not merely philosophical abstractions, but practical keys to a life of greater ease, depth, and authentic power. The modern world faces a crisis of meaning, burnout, anxiety, and disconnection from our essential nature. We have constructed elaborate civilizations, developed incredible technologies, and accumulated vast knowledge. Yet many find themselves spiritually impoverished, emotionally exhausted, and fundamentally unsatisfied. We pursue happiness through external achievements and acquisitions, only to discover that each accomplishment brings only temporary relief before the hunger returns. We try to control outcomes through force of will, only to exhaust ourselves fighting against currents we cannot see. We identify with roles, possessions, and accomplishments, only to find these things cannot provide the solid ground we seek. Lao Tzu diagnosed these human predicaments 25 centuries ago, and his prescriptions remain as potent today as when they were first inscribed. His teachings point toward a different way of being in the world, one that works with reality rather than against it, that draws power from alignment rather than effort, that finds freedom through acceptance rather than control. This is not a path of passivity or withdrawal from life, but rather a way of engaging with existence from a place of deep wisdom, clarity, and connection to something greater than our individual egos. Throughout this exploration, we will journey deep into the heart of Lao Tzu's teachings, examining the nature of the Tao itself, the revolutionary concept of Wu Wei or effortless action, the cultivation of inner stillness and awareness, the dissolution of ego-based illusions, the paradoxical path to true strength through yielding, the art of leadership and influence through humility, the practice of balance and harmony, and ultimately the transformation of consciousness that allows us to live as expressions of the eternal way. We will draw connections between these ancient insights and modern psychology, neuroscience, and practical application, revealing how profoundly relevant these teachings remain for contemporary life. The Tao Te Ching is not a text to be merely read and understood intellectually. It is a mirror that reflects our own nature back to us, a map that can only be followed through direct experience, and a door that opens only when we stop trying to force our way through. As Lao Tzu himself wrote in the opening lines of his masterwork, the Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. This cryptic beginning sets the tone for everything that follows. We are not dealing with philosophy that can be grasped by the conceptual mind alone, but with something that must be tasted, felt, and embodied. The journey we are about to undertake is one of unlearning as much as learning, of seeing through illusions rather than acquiring new beliefs, of remembering what we have always known beneath the layers of conditioning and confusion. Lao Tzu invites us to return to our original nature, to rediscover the spontaneous wisdom that flows when we stop interfering with ourselves, and to recognize our intimate connection with the vast intelligence that animates all existence. This is a promise of the Tao, the invitation extended by the mysterious old master who disappeared into the mountains but left behind a treasure more valuable than all the gold in the emperor's palace. Let us now begin our exploration of these profound teachings, approaching them not merely as historical curiosities or philosophical abstractions, but as living wisdom that can transform how we relate to ourselves, others, and the fundamental mystery of being alive. The gate is open, the way is calling, and like Lao Tzu riding westward on his buffalo, we need only have the courage to embark on the journey. Section 2. Understanding the Tao, the nameless source of all things. At the very heart of Lao Tzu's teaching lies a concept so fundamental, so all-encompassing, and yet so elusive that it defies all attempts at definition. This is a Tao, a word that can be translated as way, path, principle, or source, but which ultimately points to something that transcends language itself. The Tao is not a god to be worshipped, not a force to be manipulated, not a theory to be proven, but rather the ineffable ground of being from which all things emerge, into which all things return. The opening paradox of the Tao Te Ching immediately establishes the limitations of conceptual understanding when it comes to the Tao. The Tao that can be told is not the eternal Tao. The name that can be named is not the eternal name. This is not mere mystical obscurantism or poetic flourish, but precise pointing to a fundamental truth. The map is not the territory, the menu is not the meal, and words about reality are not reality itself. The Tao is the territory, the meal, the reality that exists prior to and independent of our conceptual overlays. Yet Lao Tzu does not leave us in complete darkness. Throughout the Tao Te Ching, he offers image after image, metaphor after metaphor, paradox after paradox, each designed to point the mind toward this ineffable reality. The Tao is described as the mother of all things, as emptiness that contains infinite potential, as the nameless beginning of heaven and earth, as that which is complete unto itself and never diminishes no matter how much is drawn from it. These descriptions are not contradictory but complementary, each illuminating a different facet of something too vast to be captured in a single image. One of the most powerful metaphors for the Tao is that of water. Water is soft and yielding, yet it wears away the hardest stone. It naturally seeks the lowest places that others disdain, yet it is essential for all life. It adapts perfectly to whatever container it finds itself in, yet maintains its essential nature. It flows effortlessly around obstacles rather than fighting against them, yet possesses tremendous power. In these qualities of water, Lao Tzu sees a reflection of the Tao itself, humble, adaptable, persistent, life-giving, and ultimately irresistible. Another crucial metaphor is that of the valley or the hollow. The Tao is like an empty valley that can receive all things because it is not already filled. It is like the hollow center of a wheel that allows the wheel to turn, like the empty space within a vessel that makes the vessel useful, like the openings in a house that make it habitable. This emphasis on emptiness is profoundly counterintuitive to the usual human orientation toward fullness, accumulation, and solidity. Yet Lao Tzu insists that it is precisely emptiness that possesses the greatest utility and power. The Tao is also characterized by a kind of dynamic stillness or active receptivity. It does nothing, yet nothing is left undone. This concept, which anticipates the fuller development of Wu Wei that we will explore later, suggests that the Tao operates not through forceful intervention, but through allowing things to unfold according to their own nature. Like a mother who does not need to force her children to grow, but simply provides the conditions for growth to occur naturally. The Tao does not impose, but enables. From a metaphysical perspective, the Tao can be understood as the undifferentiated unity that exists prior to the emergence of the phenomenal world. It is being before beings, existence before existence, the seamless wholeness that precedes a division into subject and object, self and other, this and that. Yet the Tao is not separate from the manifest world. It is simultaneously the source, the substance, and the pattern of all that exists. The 10,000 things, as Lao Tzu calls a multiplicity of phenomena, are not separate from the Tao, but are the Tao expressing itself in infinite forms. This relationship between the unmanifest Tao and the manifest world can be understood to the concepts of the nameless and the named. The nameless is a Tao in its undifferentiated state, the primal mystery that exists before distinctions arise. The name refers to the world of forms, the realm of separate things with particular identities. Both, Lao Tzu tells us, spring from the same source but diverge in their naming. The mystery of their unity is the gateway to understanding all wonders. In psychological terms, the Tao might be understood as the ground of consciousness itself, the awareness that exists prior to and independent of thought. Just as the Tao is the spacious emptiness from which all things arise, pure awareness is the open space in which all mental content appears and disappears. When we identify with thoughts, emotions, and sensations, we lose sight of this fundamental awareness. When we rest in awareness itself, we touch something that resembles what Lao Tzu points to as a Tao. Modern physics, particularly quantum mechanics and systems theory, has revealed aspects of reality that resonate remarkably with Taoist insights. The discovery that observer and observed cannot be separated, that the universe operates as an interconnected whole rather than a collection of separate parts, that emptiness or vacuum contains tremendous potential energy. All of these findings echo what Lao Tzu intuited millennia ago. The Tao can be seen as the underlying field or matrix from which all phenomena emerge, the implicate order that enfolds all things in unity even while they appear separate in their explicate forms. Understanding the Tao is not merely an intellectual exercise, but a transformation of perception and being. It requires a shift from the usual subject-object dualism of ordinary consciousness to a more direct, non-conceptual awareness of the seamless unity of existence. This shift does not happen through effort or striving, but through a kind of relaxing back into what has always already been the case. We do not need to achieve or attain the Tao. We need only to recognize that we have never been separate from it. Lao Tzu emphasizes that the sage is one who has come into alignment with the Tao, who moves through life in accordance with its principles rather than in opposition to them. This alignment is not achieved through learning more or doing more, but through unlearning and undoing, stripping away the artificial constructs and conditioned patterns that obscure our original unity with the way. The sage returns to the root, abides in the source, and acts from a place of deep harmony with the fundamental pattern of existence. The practical implications of understanding the Tao are profound. When we recognize that there is an underlying intelligence and order to existence, we can begin to trust the process of life rather than constantly try and control it. When we see that emptiness is the source of all fullness, we can embrace simplicity rather than chasing endless accumulation. When we understand that the Tao operates through allowing rather than forcing, we can begin to work with reality rather than against it. This is the beginning of wisdom, not the acquisition of knowledge, but the direct recognition of how things actually are. The Tao remains ultimately mysterious, and Lao Tzu never claims to have exhausted its depths or captured it completely in words. He offers his images and insights as fingers pointing at the moon, reminding us always to look at what is being pointed to rather than fixating on the finger itself. The Tao is not something to be believed in or understood intellectually, but something to be experienced directly, tasted in the midst of ordinary life, sensed in the pause between breaths, recognized in the space between thoughts. As we proceed in our exploration of Lao Tzu's teachings, we will see how every principle, practice, and insight flows from this fundamental recognition of the Tao. Wu Wei, stillness, simplicity, humility, flexibility, all of these are expressions of alignment with the way. They are not arbitrary virtues or moral prescriptions, but natural consequences of seeing clearly into the nature of reality itself. Understanding the Tao is thus the foundation upon which the entire edifice of Taoist wisdom rests. Section 3. Wu Wei, the power of effortless action. Perhaps no concept from Lao Tzu's teachings has captured the imagination of seekers and scholars quite like Wu Wei, usually translated as non-action, effortless action, or action through non-action. This principle lies at the very heart of Taoist philosophy and offers a radically different approach to accomplishing things in the world. Yet Wu Wei is also one of the most misunderstood concepts from the Tao Te Ching, often mistaken for passivity, laziness, or withdrawal from engagement with life. To understand Wu Wei properly, we must first dispel the misconception that it means doing nothing. The Chinese character Wu does mean without or non, and Wei means action or doing, but the combination points to something far more subtle than mere inactivity. Wu Wei refers to action that arises spontaneously from our true nature rather than from ego-driven striving, action that flows with a grain of reality rather than against it, action that accomplishes much while appearing to do little, action that is perfectly timed and effortlessly effective because it is aligned with the natural course of things. Lao Tzu repeatedly emphasizes this principle throughout the Tao Te Ching. The Tao does nothing, yet nothing is left undone, he writes. The sage does not act, yet brings about transformation without effort. These statements seem paradoxical from the perspective of ordinary achievement-oriented consciousness, which assumes that accomplishment requires forceful action, strategic planning, and determined effort. Yet Lao Tzu is pointing to a different kind of efficacy altogether, one rooted in alignment with the Tao, rather than in personal will. The natural world provides countless examples of Wu Wei in action. A tree does not strain to grow. It simply grows according to its nature, responding to light, water, and soil without any sense of effort or achievement. A river does not try to reach the ocean. It simply flows downhill, following the path of least resistance, yet inevitably arriving at its destination. Seeds sprout, flowers bloom, the seasons change. All of this happens without anyone trying to make it happen, without any sense of struggle or forcing. In human terms, Wu Wei can be understood through experiences we have all had of being in the flow or in the zone. Think of a time when you were completely absorbed in an activity you love, perhaps playing music, creating art, playing a sport, writing, or engaging in deep conversation. In these moments, there is no sense of a separate self laboring to accomplish something. Action happens spontaneously, with a kind of effortless precision. Time seems to disappear. There is no gap between intention and execution, no internal resistance or second-guessing. This is Wu Wei. Modern psychology has extensively studied this state, which researcher Mihai Csikszentmihalyi termed flow. His research reveals that people report their highest levels of happiness and satisfaction not when relaxing or being entertained, but when engaged in challenging activities that call forth their full attention and skill. In flow states, the sense of separation between self and action dissolves, self-consciousness disappears, and action becomes spontaneous and enjoyable. This research validates what Lao Tzu intuited centuries ago, that the most effective action arises when the ego self gets out of the way. The key to Wu Wei lies in understanding the relationship between effort and effectiveness. We typically assume that more effort leads to better results, but Lao Tzu points out that this is often not the case. Excessive effort can be counterproductive, creating tension, rigidity, and resistance that actually impede our ability to accomplish our aims. The exhausted student who has been cramming for hours often performs worse than the one who rests and approaches the exam fresh. The athlete who tries too hard becomes tight and awkward, while the one who plays with relaxed focus achieves peak performance. The person desperately seeking love repels others with their neediness, while the one who is content in themselves naturally attracts connection. Wu Wei involves a kind of skillful timing, what the Greeks call kairos, the opportune moment when action flows with minimal resistance. Lao Tzu uses a metaphor of the butcher, whose knife never dulls, because he cuts along the natural seams in the meat rather than hacking through bone and gristle. This image illustrates how Wu Wei works with a grain of reality, finding the path where things naturally want to go rather than forcing outcomes through sheer will. This principle has profound implications for how we approach problems and challenges. The usual human response to obstacles is to push harder, try more forcefully, apply greater effort. But Wu Wei suggests a different approach. Step back, observe carefully, wait for the right opening, then act decisively but with minimal force applied at precisely the right point. A small intervention at the right time and place can produce effects far greater than massive effort applied in the wrong way. In practical terms, cultivating Wu Wei begins with developing greater sensitivity to what is actually happening in the present moment rather than being lost in conceptual overlay. We must learn to sense the flow of situations, to feel the currents and countercurrents. to perceive the subtle patterns that indicate how things want to unfold. This requires quieting the incessant chatter of the strategic, planning mind and developing a more intuitive, embodied awareness. Wu Wei also involves learning to work with our own psychological resistance. Often we create internal conflict by trying to force ourselves to feel, think, or do things that go against our nature. We try to make ourselves be more extroverted when we are naturally introverted, to pursue careers that don't align with our values, to maintain relationships that have run their course. This internal forcing creates tremendous suffering and ineffectiveness. Wu Wei applied to ourselves means honoring our own nature, following our own way, allowing our actions to flow from authentic desire rather than imposed obligation. The principle of Wu Wei does not mean we never take action, or that we simply drift passively through life accepting whatever happens. Rather, it means that our actions arise from a place of clarity, alignment, and presence rather than from ego-driven grasping, aversion, or confusion. We still set intentions, make choices, and engage with the world, but we do so with a quality of ease and responsiveness rather than forcing and controlling. Lao Tzu makes clear that Wu Wei is particularly relevant to leadership and influence. The sage leader, he tells us, leads by not leading, accomplishes by not doing, teaches by not teaching. This paradoxical style of leadership works by creating conditions for others to flourish rather than by imposing control, by inspiring rather than commanding, by removing obstacles rather than pushing people forward. The best leader is one whose presence is barely noticed by those being led, who facilitates outcomes so skillfully that people feel they accomplished everything themselves. In the realm of interpersonal relationships, Wu Wei suggests a way of being with others that is responsive rather than reactive, that listens deeply rather than planning what to say next, that allows space for others to be themselves rather than trying to change or fix them. This quality of presence is often more transformative than any amount of advice, intervention, or effort to help. Simply being fully present with another person, without agenda or judgment, creates a space in which healing and growth naturally occur. The practice of Wu Wei is intimately connected with the cultivation of inner stillness, which we will explore more fully in a later section. When the mind is churning with thoughts, the emotions roiling with reactivity, and the body tense with stress, spontaneous right action cannot arise. Wu Wei emerges from a ground of inner quiet, from a consciousness that is clear and spacious rather than cluttered and contracted. This is why meditation and contemplative practice are essential supports for developing the capacity for effortless action. One of the most challenging aspects of Wu Wei is learning to distinguish it from mere laziness, avoidance, or apathy. There is a crucial difference between not acting because you are aligned with the Tao and not acting because you are afraid, lazy, or unconscious. Wu Wei involves a quality of alert presence, of being fully engaged even while not forcing outcomes. It is choosing not to act from a place of wisdom and sensitivity to timing, not from a place of checking out or giving up. The cultivation of Wu Wei is ultimately a path of unlearning and undoing. We are conditioned from an early age to believe that we must force, strive, and push to get what we want from life. We learn to trust only what we can control, to believe that success comes through effort and strategy, to see ourselves as separate agents battling against a resistant world. Wu Wei asks us to question all of these assumptions and to discover through direct experience that there is another way, a way that is more aligned with the fundamental intelligence of existence, more sustainable, more joyful, and ultimately more effective. As we learn to practice Wu Wei, we begin to recognize a profound shift in our relationship to life. Rather than feeling like we are fighting upstream against a powerful current, we discover what it means to align with that current and allow ourselves to be carried. Rather than exhausting ourselves trying to control outcomes we cannot control, we learn to focus our energy where it can make a real difference. Rather than living in constant tension and stress, we discover a way of being that is both fully engaged and deeply relaxed. This is a gift of Wu Wei, the power of effortless action, the way that accomplishes everything while appearing to do nothing at all. Section 4. The illusions of the ego and the return to authenticity. Central to Lao Tzu's teaching is a penetrating critique of the artificial constructs and false identifications that obscure our original nature. The ego, though Lao Tzu does not use this precise term, is understood as a collection of conditioned patterns, social masks, conceptual overlays, and compulsive desires that separate us from the spontaneous wisdom of the Tao. This section explores how Lao Tzu diagnosed a fundamental human predicament and prescribed a return to simplicity, authenticity, and what he calls the uncarved block. The Tao Te Ching contains a systematic dismantling of the values and structures that civilized society holds dear. Lao Tzu questions the pursuit of knowledge, the accumulation of possessions, the desire for status and recognition, the rigid codification of morality, and even the very concepts of good and evil as conventionally understood. This is not nihilism or mere contrarianism, but rather a point to how these constructs, however useful they may appear, ultimately entangle us in suffering and separate us from our essential nature. Consider Lao Tzu's treatment of knowledge. In a passage that sounds shocking to modern ears, he writes, "In the pursuit of learning, every day something is acquired. In the pursuit of the Tao, every day something is dropped." And even more provocatively, abandon learning and there will be no sorrow. This is not a call for ignorance or anti-intellectualism, but rather an exposure how conceptual knowledge can become an obstacle to direct perception of reality. The accumulated learning that we mistake for wisdom is often merely a collection of other people's opinions, cultural conditioning, and abstract theories that have no grounding in lived experience. The ego thrives on this kind of knowledge because it provides a sense of security and control. When we can name, categorize, and explain everything, we create the illusion that we understand and have mastery over reality. But Lao Tzu sees this as a kind of blindness. The more we know intellectually, the less we actually see. Our concepts and theories become a filter through which we perceive the world, preventing direct contact with things as they are. The sage, in contrast, knows without knowing, sees without concepts, responds to reality directly rather than to a mediating layer of accumulated learning. Similarly, Lao Tzu challenges the pursuit of moral goodness as conventionally understood. He writes, "When the Tao is lost, there is goodness. When goodness is lost, there is morality. When morality is lost, there is ritual. Ritual is a husk of faith and the beginning of chaos." This progression describes a movement away from spontaneous alignment with the way toward increasingly rigid and external systems of control. When people live in harmony with the Tao, there is no need to speak of goodness. They simply act naturally in ways that benefit all. When this natural harmony is lost, concepts of good and bad arise, creating division and judgment. The ego is fundamentally built on these kinds of distinctions and judgments. It defines itself through comparison. I am good, you are bad. I am successful, you are a failure. I am right, you are wrong. This constant evaluating and categorizing creates a fragmented, conflictual relationship with reality. Lao Tzu points toward a consciousness that exists prior to these divisions, a way of being that responds to each situation freshly rather than to the lens of fixed concepts and judgments. The metaphor of the uncarved block, or PU in Chinese, is one of Lao Tzu's most powerful images for our original nature. The uncarved block represents pure potential, the state of being before we have been shaped by culture, education, and conditioning into particular forms. It is simplicity, wholeness, and authenticity. Once the block is carved into a specific shape, a bowl, a statue, a tool, it gains a specific function but loses its infinite potential. Similarly, as we are shaped into particular roles, identities, and personalities, we gain social functionality but lose touch with our essential nature. The return to the uncarved block does not mean regressing to some primitive, childish state, but rather recovering a quality of simplicity and directness beneath all our acquired complexity. It means recognizing how much of what we take to be ourself is actually conditioned pattern, social performance, and conceptual overlay. The ego is like layers of clothing we put on and then forgotten we are wearing, eventually mistaking the clothing for our actual body. Lao Tzu's prescription for this predicament is radical simplicity. He advocates reducing desires, minimizing possessions, limiting knowledge, embracing obscurity, and cultivating contentment with little. To modern ears, trained to equate more with better, growth with goodness, and expansion with progress, this teaching sounds like deprivation. But Lao Tzu understands that the endless pursuit of more is itself a manifestation of the ego's fundamental dissatisfaction. The ego always lacks, always wants, always feels incomplete. No amount of acquisition, achievement, or recognition can fill this void because the void itself is an illusion created by the sense of separation. From a psychological perspective, much of modern psychotherapy and spiritual psychology has arrived at similar conclusions about the ego's structure and function. The ego is understood as a necessary developmental achievement that allows us to function in the social world, but also as a source of considerable suffering when we completely identify with it. The sense of being a separate, solid self that must constantly defend, prove, and aggrandize itself creates a state of chronic tension and fear. Contemporary teachers in various wisdom traditions speak of the ego as a kind of trance or dream from which we can awaken. The separate self we take ourselves to be is not entirely false. We do exist as distinct organisms with particular characteristics, but the way we relate to this self, the stories we tell about it, the importance we assign to it, and the permanence we attribute to it are all forms of delusion. Lao Tzu's teaching points toward waking up from this trance and recognizing a deeper identity with the Tao itself. The practical path toward this recognition involves what Lao Tzu calls subtraction rather than addition. Instead of accumulating more practices, more knowledge, more spiritual experiences, we strip away what is false, what is conditioned, what is unnecessary. This is not a grim process of deprivation, but a liberating unburdening. As we let go of unnecessary desires, we discover natural contentment. As we release our fixed ideas about how things should be, we encounter reality as it actually is. As we stop defending and promoting our self-image, we find an ease and freedom we never knew was possible. Lao Tzu frequently uses the example of the child to illustrate this quality of natural authenticity. The infant does not scheme or calculate, does not worry about status or reputation, does not judge or compare, yet is perfectly whole and complete. Of course, the infant is also vulnerable, unconscious in certain ways, and dependent on others. The sage is not advocating a return to infantile helplessness, but rather a recovery of the child's unself-conscious presence while retaining adult consciousness and capability. This is sometimes called the second innocence. Innocence regained through awareness rather than innocence that exists only through ignorance. The dissolution of ego identification does not mean we become bland, personality-less automatons. Rather, freed from the compulsive need to maintain a particular self-image, our authentic nature can express itself more fully. True individuality emerges when we stop trying to be somebody and simply are who we are. Paradoxically, when we let go of the project of self-construction, we discover our true self, which was there all along beneath the constructed identity.